Disclaimer. Some of the things talked about in this episode may not be suitable for young listeners. Viewer discretion advised.
Cabin 13 Productions.
And so she raised her hands in defense at seeing the gun. She had her keys in her hand, and so the bullet ricocheted in front of her face off the keys.
He was a Canadian seasonal mall Santa / serial killer who was convicted of murdering 8 men.
They all formed together and just beat the ever-living shit out of him.
It's a good thing that something can bring the people together.
Yeah. He kept a jewelry box with her eyes inside as a souvenir.
Whoa, what?
Yeah.
I'm such a loser, sweating God, I'm the worst.
Welcome to today's episode of the Woodsmen Podcast. Today we'll be diving into the terrifying stories of 2 of the most notorious serial killers in modern history. Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, who unleashed a wave of fear across California in the 1980s, and Bruce McArthur, a seemingly ordinary landscaper from Toronto who secretly hunted and murdered vulnerable men in the community. Both men left a trail of horror and devastation, their methods as cold and calculated as they were terrifying. As we uncover the twisted details of their crimes, we'll explore how they evaded capture for so long and the chilling impact that they had on their victims and the communities they terrorized. Now stay with us, because these stories are not for the faint of heart.
Welcome back to the Woodsmen Podcast. We're your hosts, Joey Rucker.
And Brent Murphy.
And welcome back, chat. Another week, another nickel, as we've always said, every housekeeping.
Dude, I would love to know if it's been every single week.
It's been pretty close. Great. I think the only thing we say more often is later, Gators.
Gators.
But yes, welcome back. I hope you guys enjoyed last week's episode, the Revenant kind of review and comparison to the real life story. I liked it. I thought it was fun.
Hugh Glass is crazy.
He's a wild man.
Bro,
his real life story is kind of lamer than his movie story, as I claimed.
Yeah.
It just, he doesn't have a motive. That's what we came to the conclusion on.
Let's be honest.
He had nothing to fight for. That damn rifle was not worth the trek.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But
we got some housekeeping.
Yeah, we do. We do have some housekeeping. If you guys did watch last week's episode, we had a bit of a promotion instead of the Bear Facts segment where we promoted our new show, Back to the Cabin, on Patreon that you can find right over there.
Yeah.
And so we're still trying to promote it. We still want to get it like in tune and like keep pushing it. Like, we don't have much other than that one episode so far, but like we said in the last episode of the Woodsman, we're trying to get it out at least like once a month so far until we can start getting to 2 a month. Would you say?
Yeah, I would say.
So I think it's going to be great. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. And as we've also mentioned, every penny that we make over there is going to go to bettering this podcast and making it grow to greater heights.
Yes. And shout out to our first donation to the pod as well. Oh,
yes, that's right.
We had someone like personally send us money for the pod. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if they care if their name.
Just drop it, and if they care before we throw it up, I'll.
That's true. That's true. Well, thank you. We appreciate you. And that money is gonna definitely go to us. Literally, probably just paying to keep the podcast up. To be honest,
hopefully, maybe we can use it to save up for that Apollo x8.
Yeah,
that'd be nice.
I mean,
I don't remember how much he gave me. If it was like $30, then maybe not. But any amount is very, very graciously benefiting us.
Yeah.
We're very thankful for it.
It's definitely enough to keep the podcast up for
the first
2 months
time that we've been given something for doing this. you
Yeah,
know? I mean, aside from like comments, which we also do appreciate, and the downloads as well. But like, this is the first thing that we have received that can actually help benefit us for the podcast physically. You know.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal because
It's been a grind.
We're a 2-man show and a 3-man show when Eric is here. As I don't think we've mentioned yet, but Eric is out sick again today.
He's not dead Joey.
He's not dead.
Like Joey has claimed in other episodes.
He's resting in peace on a safe mattress, getting over the flu.
Amen.
So yeah, he's out again this week. It's just us, kind of like the old days. But yeah, again, we really do appreciate any benefit or funds that we get for this, and we really do recommend going over there because the Patreon is where we can be unhinged. No rules, no editing, just a lot of fun sitting and kicking back with us back at the cabin. So.
Oh, I like that. like that little sneak into the name right there.
Little sneak. In other news, the election happened, and so that is your update. That if you missed Bearfax, there you go. Let me recede back into my Joey Rucker persona, not my Joseph Bearfax.
I mean, it's pretty crazy.
Like,
yo, what?
It's wild.
I mean, it's crazy, man.
And for anyone who has their opinions, we get both sides. We said in our political episode, you're totally welcome to your opinion. It is not up to us to decide or choose what you believe in or what you think is right. Either way, the election happened, and we're going to see how it goes. We're going to see how the government is changed or the same or what happens. So
yeah, the only people we can change is us. So
exactly, that's the most important part, and I think we've always tried to portray that in our show is that we got to fight for us at the end of the day, and so you should worry about bettering yourself, bettering your families, bettering your friends, because that's the people who you impact the most.
Yeah.
So, well, that's kind of all we have for the housekeeping. As always, if you have any stories, comments, questions, concerns, you can send it in to us at thewoodsmanpod@gmail.com. Forget
nice.
the at.
You got it. You got it.
The woodsmanpod@gmail.com. And you can also message. More than likely, Brent will be the one to answer. I have access to it, but Brent will answer you on the at Woodsman Pod for the Instagram. So, yeah. Are we still working on Twitter or X? Is that happening anytime soon, or just? I mean, it's happening at some point.
It's happening. It's happening.
It'll get there. We'll get there. We promised you Patreon for a year. You guys can be patient for.
It'll be up this week.
Oh, he said it. He said it.
Well, so by the time you hear this episode, check us out on X. I don't know what the username's gonna be, but
probably something similar to what we've been using.
Yeah, we'll update you on Instagram, so make sure to follow us on the Instagram.
Yep. But as you saw in the intro, we have kind of a crazy topic or subject matter today. So kick up your feet, grab a coffee. We're going to talk about some of the most wild and insane psychopaths out there to date.
This is definitely going to keep you up tonight.
Yeah, definitely.
So as we said at the beginning of the episode, just as another disclaimer, this episode, pretty deep, pretty heavy, if I do say so myself. Now, even though we like joking around, we like being funny, we will say these are real people. Real people died with all this stuff, so we'll probably still joke, but like yeah, we're very mindful of the situation. Yeah. This is like real events and pretty close to home, at least for this one.
Yeah, this story happened very close to where we live. So it's kind of a real story, Yeah. It makes it real.
Well, like why don't you get into it? Like who are we talking about?
Yeah, sure. We're starting off with I would say Notorious. I think it made news coverage over the entire country at the time. Richard Ramirez, a.k.a. the Night Stalker. Crazy individual. He was a serial killer whose brutal actions took place in Los Angeles and the San Francisco area. I wanted to kind of start off by talking about his childhood and giving sort of a look into why he may have gone down the route of his life that he did. And as Brent said, we're going to try and tread lightly. This kind of upbringing is in no way condoning any of the actions that he did or, committed, but it also gives a lot of insight into like what kind of man this was and why his brain probably wasn't exactly all there.
Especially like the psychology of it all.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
like this stuff is real. Like
It is.
you know,
It's,
childhood trauma is real.
Yeah.
Things that happen when you're young.
Mhm.
Like it definitely leaves a mark.
No,
So,
it absolutely does. And so to start off, I wanted to mention that growing up, his father was an abusive drunk that would attack his wife and his children, Richard included. During this time, he developed brain damage and began smoking weed at the age of only 10 years old. He was also noted to have been knocked unconscious and nearly killed on multiple occasions before he was even 6.
dude, that is
It's
crazy.
nuts. Like it's already like no child in any shape or form deserves to have that kind of treatment, especially from their own parents.
You can't even fight back. Like
No.
you can't do anything. You don't even know what's going on. Like
Yeah.
wow.
His cousin Miguel Angel was a decorated Green Beret who had also committed various serial killings during his time
What?
in the Vietnam War. Yeah. And the reason that this is important to note is because Miguel took Richard under his wing for a time and did not shy away from revealing all of these evil deeds that he committed. When Richard was a kid, would like subject him to showing him photos and videos and stuff of what he would do in the Vietnam War. All these heinous, unspeakable acts.
Bro, what?
Which is another thing. It's like, not only did this guy get brutally abused as a child physically, but he is also like mentally, like your brain is not developed at that age, and to see such graphic material is already.
I don't see how you could bounce back and be any form of normal at that point.
I don't either. Absolutely not. So, unfortunately, Richard seemed very intrigued by some of these brutal acts and would later be taught by Miguel various military skills growing up. And I don't think I wrote it down, but some of these skills included being able to sneak around. I can't think of the word, but like sneak around, not get hidden, use weaponry and stuff like that. Like he was very hand-to-hand combat trained just from an early age, which is very bad.
Bro is training like just a terrible, lethal weapon.
Yeah.
Like that is, wow.
He seeked to learn these skills because of the intrigue that he had for some of these dark materials, and a lot of it because of his abusive father, which he tried to escape many times from all of his, drunk beatings. His father would even tie him to a crucifix in a cemetery overnight as punishment at time.
Bro,
So
what?
So the thing that I find that's nuts about this story already is the Night Stalker is notorious in our neck of the woods. He was in the greater Los Angeles area for most of his killings. And so a lot of people hear the Night Stalker, they hear Richard Ramirez, and they're immediately like, oh, that guy. That guy's a crazy person.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying he's not. What he did was wrong. But you have to also keep in mind his entire family kind of has this like lineage of just like brain problems and an abusive nature and physicality that just goes down these terrible roads. And I don't know. I didn't know any of this about his family until I started researching into him.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely insane. Very sad.
Yeah.
So to move on, also at the age of 14, he would drink heavily. He would smoke weed. And around this time, he started using LSD with Miguel. And during this time, he began to show interest in Satanism. I don't know the segues into some of these interests. I have to accumulate based on just a subjective point of view that it had to do a lot with just how his brain, what he saw at an early age and what his brain kind of adapted to. I don't know why he was like just thrown into
Well, I mean, think of like
these interests.
what doing all that stuff at such a young age on top of all the problems.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's one thing like, okay, like kids smoke weed or like, kids will sneak out and drink or whatever. Like that's notorious. Like
Absolutely.
people know that happens, but to have already apparent brain issues, you've been knocked out at a young age. You already have had all these multiple different things happen to you physically, psychologically, like, and then adding all that on top of it, it's like, you know,
It's a
things
recipe
can
for
morph
disaster.
very fast, you know,
Yeah.
like within your mind. Like you're
And
very
and no
impressionable.
one, isn't it that no one is fully developed, at least even with the brain, until the age of 25? Isn't that like
I think so, like your frontal like,
lobe or something? And I know that's not like every part of what makes you, but like the fact that you're not as a human fully developed until 25 speaks a lot to what can change you and what you can turn into from just an early age of all this stuff being introduced to him.
Yeah. And so much like negativity, you know, like I feel like negative stuff always, you know, follows negative energy. Like, you know, what you're putting out in the world, you know, you kind of receive back, you know, type of thing. And it's like, what is so much hurt, you know, someone can go through until, you know, things start to change in their mind. And then unfortunately you get some of the stuff that's going to happen, you know, with this person. So it's really sad, you know, sad.
It's incredibly sad.
And it's crazy to empathize with someone who can commit such heinous acts, but it's like, you know, we're all people. So it's like, dang, like couldn't imagine like.
And unfortunately, his dark interests only worsened over time, committing, from what I understand, his first or at least rape attempt at a hotel job that he had at the time, and also witnessing Miguel shoot and murder his second wife.
Bro, what?
Though these graphic instances did not repulse him. While Miguel was put under trial for what he did to his wife at the time, Richard would go to live with his older sister and her husband, a husband who introduced Richard to peeping on unknown women.
Bro, what kind
This
of
is what
family
I'm saying.
is this?
It's absolutely disgusting. It's awful. It's I mean, there's no words for it, truly.
Dude, they're just creating a monster, bro.
Yeah, and I didn't really go into detail about the husband and how he introduced Richard into all this, but I also wanted to mention that that Miguel, his cousin, he got out of the trial unscathed because they basically said it was due to PTSD from the Vietnam War, and that it was like an outburst that he couldn't really control. And so Miguel actually went on some of these peeping, you know, spurts with the husband, which I don't have the name here, and Richard.
That is crazy, dude.
At 22, he finally moved out to California and began, well, unfortunately, using cocaine, which also was basically at that point his main drug choice that he preferred.
Just one on top of the other, bro.
It just goes down the rabbit hole.
He's younger than us now at this point.
Yeah,
like
I
think of
know.
all the stuff that is like
that has happened to him, that he's done already. It's I mean, it's a lot. It's at this point that I have kind of started to go into the murders. The first murder that we're going to speak about, and again, we just want to say one more time before we start getting into the really heavy stuff, is we feel for the families. We in no way are trying to bring light to anything that these men have done. This is just so that we can explore a topic and sort of try and understand what happened, and, you know, I don't know. You kind of see where I'm going.
Yeah,
like it's just, as we've said in many episodes, we want to talk about learning, and sometimes the learning is not always going to be positive information. But with that said, just again, final disclaimer, we're going to be talking about some very graphic things. So if you're not into that, or you're under the age of, I would say, 16, maybe just think twice about listening on. But with that, let's get into it. This is what sort of made the Night Stalker notorious. This first kill to me was interesting to bring up because in 1984, Richard killed a 9-year-old girl after luring her into a basement and committing various horrifying acts to her. He was not linked to this crime, though. He was not linked to it until 2009, when DNA samples finally came back proving that he was involved. This was supposedly the first kill he actually did, but throughout the entirety of the Night Stalker case, and after they caught him and all that, he wasn't linked to this murder in the slightest until in 2006.
This was just like found out way after, wow.
Um, so moving on, unfortunately, later in 1984, a 79-year-old woman was found brutally murdered in her home, having been stabbed and gashed in numerous ways. It was around this time that Richard Ramirez started his common practice of breaking into homes, killing the victims, and robbing them in order to support not only his addiction, but also for his rent. In 1985, he shot 2 women after one parked in her own garage. One of the women managed to survive by the bullet ricocheting off of her keys and her playing dead. However, Richard killed the roommate who was still inside, and later that same night killed another woman in Monterey Park via shooting. This is when he started to earn the temporary titles of the Walk-In Killer and the Valley Intruder.
First of all, woman got saved by ricocheting off her keys?
It's an insane thing. Yeah, the way it was described is she saw him coming, and so she raised her hands in defense at seeing the gun. She had her keys in her hand, and so the bullet ricocheted in front of her face off the keys.
Bro, what? Yeah. That's crazy. Okay, yeah. Okay.
And that's one thing I'm going to get into. There's a lot of death, unfortunately, but not every story here is about, him coming out on top. Some people survived, some people got away. So that's something to keep in mind. But yeah, this is the
Sounds
first
like
one.
He was very sloppy.
Yeah, a lot of it, from what I understand, had to do with his obsession with Satanism and obviously his drug addiction. And so it wasn't like this, he had the training from Miguel, but he also, it was like very outbursty. It was very in the moment, just I'm going to figure out how to do this now because I need to pay my rent costs,
Wow.
So moving on, I'm sorry, I lost my place, but a week later, he shot and killed a 64-year-old man, and I want you to pay attention to that because I do have a point coming up. I don't know if I'll mention it soon or not, but after breaking into his home, the man's wife managed to point and shoot a shotgun at Richard, but it was not loaded.
No.
So he shot and killed her, too, and did unspeakable acts to her, which are too horrid to disclose on this podcast. However, to put it lightly, he kept a jewelry box with her eyes inside as a souvenir.
Whoa, what?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, bit crazier, a little bit crazier. Okay.
Starting to get a little harder into this whole weird fascination of his. At the crime scene of this particular murder, the authorities took photos of footprints left by Richard and matched the bullets to previous accounts that Richard had acted on, which officially confirmed that this was a serial killer case because all of the, signs kind of pointed to it all being linked to one person in general. In May of 1985, he shot and later killed a 66-year-old man and his disabled wife, all while still keeping up the robbery of each victim.
They're all a lot older.
This is what I was going to mention. Yeah. One thing I found interesting about this story is that a lot of times he would just pick a random house and go in. But strangely enough, most of his victims were the elderly, going from over the age of 70. I mean, this was actually 60. So over the age of 60 years old to the 80s. And so it's kind of in my opinion, kind of also makes him a coward.
Yeah.
It's not only just that he's a horrific man, but he's also not exactly fighting up against someone who can fight back.
Yeah. Well, it also sounds like, if you're thinking psychologically, it sounds like maybe placing his parents into that role.
Oh, you know what? I didn't think of that.
An older, because if he's in his 20s, they can be around 60s or what. He's probably, maybe subconsciously taking it out on older people as
That's a good point. No, I honestly didn't think about that, but you're absolutely right. I would honestly agree with you right there. 2 weeks later, after this murder, he used a hammer to beat and abuse 2 elderly sisters in their house. He also drew satanic pentagrams on their walls and on their thighs with, I believe, lipstick that they had. Both of them survived, but unfortunately died later in the hospital due to their injuries. The next day, he and killed a woman in her home. He tied up the woman's son to her via handcuffs afterward.
Oh my God, dude.
And it was at this point that, honestly, chat, I couldn't keep writing every account that he had gone through in great detail because this was just becoming a lot for me. I was
This is so sad, bro.
and because as you can see, I've also like shortened some of them so that
Yeah.
I didn't have to put in every graphic detail. So it's a lot. I have a list here of sort of the rest of the offenses, but they're very shorter, so we're going to kind of just fly through them
Yeah.
so that we can kind of talk more about the Night Stalker himself. But after this point, he was charged with stabbing a 75-year-old woman with a butter knife, bludgeoned a 16-year-old girl with a tire iron. However, she survived, needing
What?
478 stitches. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Sorry for
Oh.
my nose. I have a little bit of mucus, chat. But stomped. Sorry, this is getting back into it. Stomped on the head of a 60-year-old woman. Attempted to another 63-year-old woman. Killed an elderly couple with a machete. Shot and killed two 32-year-old parents in their home. Shot and attempted to murder a couple in their home. However, they survived. Killed a father in his home and his wife. And then that's kind of like the main accounts that we have on him during his time in Los Angeles, because at this point,
That's just Los Angeles?
that's just Los Angeles. And the happenings in San Francisco, as you'll see in a second here, are not nearly as much as happened in Los Angeles, but this is where the story starts to kind of progress into why he got caught and how he ended up in prison. So as I mentioned, I believe at the beginning of the story, later, Richard fled to San Francisco after following the news coverage of his heinous acts in Los Angeles. He was watching the news like every night, and at this point, people had suspected a serial killer, so they knew somebody was out there doing this, breaking into homes, killing the elderly. There was a system, there was a rhythm to his actions. So he knew he had to kind of get out of there. So when he went to San Francisco, his terrible acts did not stop, however. He beat and murdered another couple, drawing more of these pentagrams at the scene. And in this specific case, he wrote the name Jack the Knife on their walls. But it was another key case where he left another footprint. The reason that, and I believe there's also a few stories that I didn't mention also had a footprint as well, and which is important because this print matched an Avia shoe brand. Do you know what Avia is? I've never heard of it.
I haven't heard of it.
But I actually think that makes sense because after some investigation, only 6 had been made in the men's shoe size of that brand. 5 of which, bro, were sent and shipped to Arizona, and only 1 being shipped to Los Angeles.
Bro, whoa.
The first
what?
immense
That's crazy.
what is evidence?
Yeah.
Being linked to him. Now
Because what are the chances, you know?
Exactly.
Wow.
This information was given to the public, unfortunately, over a news broadcasting, which Richard found out about.
Yeah.
So he dropped the pair of shoes that he had off the side of the Golden Gate. On another attempted burglary, I believe now back in no, this may have been still in San Francisco. He had another attempt of burglary and I would imagine murder. However, Richard was caught too soon to make a move by a 13-year-old boy named James, so Richard fled the scene. Instead, he entered a different home and killed another man and the man's fiance, declaring himself as the Night Stalker. And there he was like, tell them it was me. Tell them it was the Night Stalker. This is how he got the name. He like gave him to himself. He was obsessed with himself. And I think you find this a lot with these kind of people.
Yeah.
Once they start to find that like glory or that kind of...
Well, they're almost like confident too. They've done it enough times where they're like, I'm definitely not getting caught after like the 6th time doing this. Like, and they just kind of...
Let alone how many he's done, you know?
Yeah.
It's like... So this next segment, or these next 2 paragraphs that I want to read for you, chat, maybe 3, my apologies. These come directly from the source that I got because I don't want to I want to make it known that I'm not going to paraphrase this. This is directly from Wikipedia, I believe. But this kind of goes into how he got caught and what happened.
Yeah.
So that we can kind of sort of shut this topic down, but also talk a little bit to ourselves about him and what our opinions are. So, reading directly from the source, Erickson, who I believe was, I apologize, chat. I believe was James. Sorry if I. Oh, no. I apologize. So the woman, so the last instance that I gave was that he killed another man and the man's fiance.
Yeah.
The man's fiance lived and did not get killed.
Okay.
Her last name was Erickson. So I'm sorry, I had to remember that in the back of my mind. So going from the source, Erickson, the woman, gave a detailed description of her assailant to investigators, and police obtained a cast of Ramirez's footprint from the Romero house. Romero is the last name of James, the house that the kid was at.
Okay, yeah.
The stolen Toyota, which I just didn't mention, but he's had, I think, 2 cars, but one main stolen car, which he's used at almost every crime, was found abandoned on August 28th in Koreatown, Los Angeles, and police obtained a single footprint from the rearview mirror, despite Ramirez's careful efforts to wipe the car clean of his prints. Print was positively identified as belonging to Ramirez, who was described by police as a 25-year-old drifter from Texas, with a long rap sheet that included many arrests by traffic and illegal drug violations. The identification of Ramirez's print was described as a near miracle, as the system used to identify him was recently installed, as well as the fact that the system contained the fingerprints of criminals born after January 1st, 1960, only 2 months before Ramirez was born. So this was like an incredibly lucky feat, right?
That's
that they
crazy.
could find his information. After noticing a group of elderly Hispanic women fearfully identifying him as El Matador, Ramirez saw his face on the front page of the newspaper La Opinion, I believe is how you would pronounce it, with a headline calling him Invasor Nocturno, which means night invader, and fled from the store in a panic. So by this point, news has gotten out. They now know who he is. They have his face. They have his pictures. They have his DNA. They know who this guy is. His face is on every news outlet everywhere in the greater Los Angeles area.
I mean, hey, he was a guy, but it's a cool ass name, the Night Invader. That sounds like a cool ass superhero name. Am I right? Like Batman, like Nightwing, Night Invader.
That's the thing that's always funny to me is why do we give these terrible people?
Why do they get cool ass names? Like why?
It's just, and I think that fuels his obsession.
The ego. It fuels the ego.
Because he, as we saw, he came up with Night Stalker.
Yeah.
But originally they had the Home Invader or whatever it was called, or the Walk-In Killer. So they're already giving him names. They're already fueling this sense of pride in him, this sick pride. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know why they get all the cool names. Yeah. These terrible people.
These terrible people.
But he fled the store in a panic. After running across the Santa Ana freeway, he attempted to carjack an unlocked Ford Mustang, but was pulled out by angry residents Faustino Pinon and Jose Burgoyne. Sorry if I mispronounced these people's names, but
sons.
Sorry. Yes, but by their sons.
Yeah.
Ramirez ran across the street and attempted to take the car keys from Angelina de la Torre. Her husband, Manuel de la Torre, witnessed the attempted stealing and struck Ramirez over the head with a fence post in the pursuit. A group of over 10 residents, including Jose Burgoyne's sons, formed and chased Ramirez down Hubbard Street in Boyle Heights. They soon restrained Ramirez and relentlessly beat him. At around 8 a.m., police were called over a disturbance in the area with few other details. Police quickly arrived on Hubbard Street and took a severely beaten Ramirez into custody.
Dude, the people. Mm-hmm. The people got tired of it. They're sick and tired of this guy.
I don't want to make a false claim here, but I believe if you guys watch the Netflix documentary of this story, I think they have helicopter news footage
Oh,
of
wow.
like the townsfolk
Like them
just
chasing
sort of
them down
coming in
and
and
just-
making a big deal about this. Yeah, so it's a wild thing because everyone sort of now knowing who he is, they
Yeah.
know what he's done.
Yeah.
They all form together and just beat the ever living shit out of him.
It's a good thing that something can bring the people together.
Yeah, exactly. Trump and Kamala?
Nah.
Night Stalker? Yeah, all right. So to finish out this story, on August 7th, 2006, Ramirez's first round of state appeals ended unsuccessfully when the California Supreme Court upheld his convictions and death sentence. On September 7th, 2006, the California Supreme Court denied the request for the rehearing. Ramirez had additional appeals pending until the time of his death. Ramirez died of complications secondary to B-cell lymphoma at Marin General Hospital in Green Bay, California. On June 7th, 2013, he had also been affected by chronic substance abuse and chronic hepatitis C viral infection. His body was not claimed, so it was cremated. And that's kind of... There's still some more details if you guys really want to look into the story and like see like more detailed accounts of how all this happened and how his time in prison went, because obviously that's a big jump from the, I believe, 80s into 2006.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the story of the Night Stalker.
That is
A wild case, to say the least.
I just can't believe the townsfolk just...
It's my favorite part of the story.
Like, that's crazy,
Yeah.
because, I mean, like, what are the chances that that's ever happened? Like, ever.
It's
where the
absolutely
townsfolk
crazy.
got their revenge
Yeah, because it's
before.
like most of the time
like-
these people, they get caught and then they just have to wait in prison for their sentencing and no one ever feels real justice. Now, I'm not condoning that beating the ever-living shit out of someone is true justice. However, as we have made clear on this podcast already, this man's actions
This is
are
a sick guy.
This is a sick
this is
guy.
a sick guy.
So he deserved it. He deserved every bit of beating that he got, you know. It's crazy because what I was going to mention too was obviously we said that this was in the greater Los Angeles area. This was very close to home for us.
Yeah.
My family has talked about how they remember this happening.
Yeah,
and
so do
how
mine.
They had to like lock their doors, and at a time, my mom lived fairly close to one of the killings. I don't want to like say how close because I'll get that information wrong, but close enough for her to like pull up a map and show me like on the map how close it was.
Yeah.
So it was a crazy time for California, you know. A lot of people were affected. A lot of people had to lock their doors at night. That's a lot of I'm sure that the Night Stalker is probably one of the primary reasons we have all these like security systems in houses these days, you know.
Yeah,
like,
especially over here for
Mhm.
sure, because I think a lot of people didn't. I don't think they thought about like the real dangers that could happen, like in Los Angeles, as far
Mhm.
as like something like that, you know, because it's highly populated. It'd be very hard to get away with something like that in such a highly populated area.
Yeah.
You know, so I think like it kind of threw everyone for a loop, like out there in the 80s, because it's like, oh,
yeah.
first of all, stuff like this doesn't even really happen that much.
Yeah.
Like, you know, as compared to today, I mean, we see murder constantly,
Unfortunately.
you know.
Yeah.
But I mean, to not only have murders, but you know, serial murders.
Yeah,
You know.
by one guy, dude. It's honestly not to compare them. They're both completely separate types of tragedy, but it's a lot like 9/11 in the way that, like, you know, going on a plane, going through the airport, it was a very easy process. There was almost no
Yeah,
process. It was
yeah.
just you get on a plane, you fly to your destination, and
It
after
was like taking a
9/11
bus.
Yeah,
It was like taking a bus.
Exactly.
Like,
And after 9/11, you have all of these procedures. You have to go through baggage claim and what is the term I'm
now
looking
you
for?
can't even take shampoo in a normal bottle, guys.
because
Like,
it could be a bomb. And it's a lot like that. It's like you're saying, you know, now people have to lock their doors because no one's ever had anything like this.
yeah.
It's crazy. So has your family also talked about how they remember it and stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, it's weird. I don't really think we've talked. I mean, we've talked about the Night Stalker, but we haven't really talked about it super extensive, mainly because, like, when my grandma was younger, at her house down over here, before she moved in with us, she actually got broken into.
Oh.
Yeah, and, like, robbed. And, like, you know, my grandma lived alone. So,
wow.
you know,
I didn't know that.
that's like a real, it's like a real fear. And then on top of that, adding something like the Night Stalker, you know,
so
just
she
only an hour away, you know.
Yeah.
It's a real thing, you know, it's a real thing. People, I think, sometimes forget just, you know, how much goes on until it's like right in their back door.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
No, it's crazy. Yeah, my mom, she was more willing to talk to me a little bit about like her opinions and how close it was and all that stuff since we were doing this podcast. But I remember when I first watched the documentary on Netflix and I told her about how I had just learned about the Night Stalker, she was like, I won't talk to you about it. I still like have terrible memories of that time. And
yeah.
So
when people associate so much stuff, unfortunately negative stuff, with the times that they're in, you know, in that, you know, era of time, you know, they associate like a certain time with a tragic event like that. Like you said, with 9/11.
Yeah.
You know, once it gets to September and it gets like close, you know, for some people, I mean, for us, we didn't experience it, but for people that, you know, witnessed it on TV, like live happening on the news, or like the people who were there in New York, you know, even if they weren't in the building, like for them, it's like, it's kind of like a PTSD, you know,
like
you
feel
kind of
our
like,
first,
oh man,
our
I
first
remember
one
this.
that was like ours was like COVID.
COVID,
and I'm
yeah.
like,
But like it didn't really.
It's not the same thing because it doesn't really. Who cares anymore? You know, like no one cares about COVID anymore, even though it at the time was a very drastic thing that affected all of our lives.
But think about it, we had Ebola and like all that stuff too.
Yeah, but Ebola never shut down like schools, like to the point that it did in America.
Yeah, I
and
guess
so
that's
people
true.
like I felt for all the people who like missed their proms.
Oh
and
my
stuff.
gosh, I know. I think about that, like graduating at home. Like
my sister graduated as a drive-through graduation from high school. So, you know, we did have our effects, but nothing like this. It's that thing that will change someone forever when it's like right at home, you know. I think one thing I also wanted to mention before we move on from the Night Stalker is to maybe look back one more time at his childhood, just because that was something I wasn't expecting, you know.
Yeah.
As terrible as these things were, you know, a lot of these kinds of people and the mental health issues that they have can be linked to an abusive childhood, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
And this is no different.
You know, it almost reminds me of the Menendez brothers. There's a lot of stuff going on right now in the media with them trying to get their court appeal or whatever. But their story, it's pretty much like the same thing. They just released a Netflix documentary about them, and they killed their parents, and then they got, you know, put in jail. They've been serving their time and everything. But this documentary just came out that has like shed a lot more light, you know, with people having them, you know, become, I guess, more aware of the situation. But their dad was like super like heavily abusive and like sexually abusive towards both the brothers.
Yeah.
And everything ended up happening to them completely until like I think they were like 18 or you know, something like that. And then
it's always
they
some
just
kind of story
snapped,
like that.
and
Yeah,
then
it's like you can't condone their actions, but you also can't.
But you
really
can
understand.
understand.
You can understand why someone's mind can be shattered enough to commit these kinds of things.
Yeah.
Because no mind that has dealt with some of these traumatic things. I mean, being hung to a crucifix in a cemetery as a child.
Yeah, what does that do to your mental, like...
Yeah, and it speaks the same amount of, like, mental damage and mental health issues that the father has, too. I don't know what the father did. I didn't want to look into it, unfortunately. I'm sure he had some kind of terrible upbringing as well.
Yeah.
But it's just like, you can't look at all of this. I think we're safe to say that you can't just look at all of this as just what he did without at least looking into why.
Yeah.
Again, not to condone it.
Yeah, nothing will condone like his actions, and especially his actions taken against people that had nothing to do with the situation in general, you know. I not to say again that I condone, the violence.
We have
but
to be
it's
so,
like, I know,
specific.
I got to be careful on how I word
Yeah.
things. But you think about, people like the Mendez brothers or the Menendez brothers. I can't think of how to pronounce it right now, but think about them, and they murdered their parents that, quite frankly, in a way, got it coming for them, like they had it coming type of thing. But you get someone like the Night Stalker where, like all this tragic stuff has happened to them and, in his life, but he's out here murdering people who have done nothing wrong, who had nothing to do with it. They're just innocent
families,
bystanders,
married couples, even children.
Yeah.
It's unforgivable.
And that's where you have to kind of like take the step back and like.
This is the Menendez brothers.
Oh, the Menendez brothers.
Menendez.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just so unfortunate, man, and especially when you think of the kids. It's like why even involve kids in any of it? There's no reason to even.
From my understanding,
consider something
he didn't
like
kill
that.
too many kids. At least some of the accounts, at least on Wikipedia. So I want to also give it a grain of salt. A lot of the big killings that I mentioned in here that involved children, he just sort of ended vaguely, like the one where he handcuffed the child to the mother that he had already killed.
Yeah.
That's just where he said it ended. But it never said like if the kid was alive or dead or if he survived or got out. The only one that I think was confirmed, at least in my research, was the first one from 2006.
Yeah.
The young child who he lured into the basement. But you're right. It's like, it's absolutely unforgivable, especially for the children, because it's like they just. But to the same degree that you brought up how he may have gone after the elderly as sort of a twisted revenge plot against his own parents, it also could just be some sick, like, if I had to go through it, so should they, since his childhood was such a bad upbringing.
And like, that's the thing, you just don't know. Like, their motivations are just unknown to the people who have no, I would say, mental, illness at that point. I would say had to have been mentally ill to some degree, to do what he was doing and have no remorse.
And it didn't help his constant drug addiction. Like I said, the reason that he would break into people's houses
was
in particular
rent and drugs.
so that he could get rent and drugs. He needed to support this ongoing addiction that was like, stabbing at him all the time.
Yeah, it's just insane. It's
insane. If we're sorry if this brings up some bad memories for anybody in our Los Angeles fan base, if we have that. I don't know if we do. I haven't checked the stats. Brent would know better than me. But, if any of you want to voice your opinion on the subject, I wouldn't necessarily say you have to tell your story, because I know that can be personal and hard for this kind of subject. But if any of you want to voice your opinion on the Night Stalker and what your thoughts on the case is, whether or not you knew about his childhood upbringing, or if that even matters to you. If you have some info, if you have any info on the case, please let us know. Like we said, you can send us a message at thewoodsmanpod@gmail.com.
Or woodsmanpod at Insta.
So let us know. Let's dial it back. We're gonna get into a bit of a different type of tale for our next notorious killer.
Yes, we are.
So look forward to that.
Ho ho ho.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed, as best you could, the informational material, at least, about the Night Stalker.
Don't worry, it only gets, well, I wouldn't say worse, but it doesn't get any better.
I hope it at least gets a little better. I mean,
it
we'll
is.
see.
It is like a Santa Claus serial killer.
I was gonna say I'm excited to hear about this one, just because purely I've never heard of this guy.
I haven't either.
When you came with me to this, when you came to me with this topic, wow, I was like,
You got it.
The words aren't going in the right order, but I forgot the order. But when you came to me with this topic, I was immediately like, okay, Santa? I'm listening.
I'm listening.
So go ahead, tell me about it.
Well, first of all, I'd like to make it clear that no, Santa Claus isn't a serial killer. And bro was only really named the Santa Claus killer because on top of his heinous acts, my man, well, no, first of all, let me rephrase that. Not my man. This guy, horrible guy. So this guy,
Mudgy.
Bruce, my man Bruce. I said it again. Whatever. We're just gonna roll with it.
My main homie.
Bruce McArthur.
Just that guy. Yeah, that's better. That's better.
He was a Canadian seasonal mall Santa.
Oh.
/ serial killer who was convicted of murdering 8 men between 2010 and 2017.
That escalated.
Yeah, just a little bit. So he really, I guess, just looked like a mall Santa, or he looked like Santa in general. Like he had the white hair, white beard, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And he used to volunteer at malls during the Christmas season. So first of all, you gotta tell every parent here that lets their kids sit on a random man's lap. You never know what random man you're sitting your kid on.
I was just going to say, dude, I was like, with today's world, I'm shocked this is still a job.
Honestly, I'm
Like-
surprised someone hasn't sued the mall or something. It's crazy, man.
Oh,
Well, his case gained widespread attention due to his method of selecting victims, the nature of his crimes, and his connection to Toronto's gay community.
okay.
So, because unfortunately, when you see the background and you see the victims and everything, you realize very quickly he had a type, especially in choosing his victims.
And this was homosexual men. That was kind of his type.
Yeah. So when you look at his background, McArthur was born on October 8th in 1951 in London, Ontario, which is, in Canada. Not Ontario, California.
Not Ontario in the UK.
He had a trouble.
Check that one
So,
off.
yeah.
Not funny list. We should explain that to Chad at some point. The checklist. But go on.
So, anyways,
Anyway.
he had a troubled personal life. There we go. Seeing some signs. Characterized by a brief history of failed relationships and accusations of abuse. He worked as a landscaper in Toronto and ran a business providing landscaping services. This work gave him access to the homes and properties of various individuals, which contributed to his ability to commit his crimes without being detected. Yeah.
Oh no.
So when you look at the victims list, McArthur targeted men who were often part of Toronto's gay community, particularly those of Middle Eastern, South Asian, or ethnic backgrounds. Many victims were known to frequent the village known as Toronto's gay district. The identities of the victims were gradually uncovered, and here are some of the names here. Well, I guess I'll list all the names. There were eight. There were 8 victims. I'm gonna try my best to pronounce the names because, I have a hard time pronouncing names on this podcast.
I believe in you.
So we have Salim Asen, Andrew Kinsman, Dean Lisowick. Yeah,
sounds
nice,
right.
nice.
Good luck on that one.
Skindara, maybe. Yeah.
I would say.
I can't pronounce your last name. I'm sorry. Abdu. Yeah. Okay.
Abdul Basir.
There we go. Yeah. Nice. Majid, Kaihan, and Hamed Ganbari. I'm so sorry, guys. I really should have studied these names because these are tough. These are tough. And then we have the final name here, Sarush Agdashla. Yeah, Adashlu. Yeah. So it's 8 victims, man.
And these are all
It's 8
fairly
people.
recent from what I'm looking at. This is
Yeah.
a recent serial killer.
We're looking
then.
at-
This
yeah.
is like 2017 to 2010.
2010. Yeah, so pretty
I had a
pretty
question
recent.
about him, actually. I don't know if you know this off the top of your head or
Yeah.
if it was in your research, but you're saying that a lot of his victims were in the gay male community.
Yeah.
You kind of noticed that same trend with the Big Dom.
Yeah.
And I was
you're right,
wondering
you're
if this, what was his name? Do you remember?
right.
Santa
MacArthur.
MacArthur.
Yeah.
Is he also himself somewhat homosexual, or is homosexual in general?
I
Do you not know?
I
off
would
the top of-
believe so.
that was kind of because
I would
that might
believe
speak
so.
a bit to his
Yeah.
his victim list. I'm just curious.
Yeah, because I mean, he's older too,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's like it's also a little different in that perspective. But yeah, I would say by the things he would do, which we will unfortunately go into, it sounded like he had maybe like a fixation with possibly dead bodies and everything.
Oh,
and I think
really?
maybe like if he wasn't like homosexual himself, maybe it was almost unfortunately like a hate like crime type of
I
thing,
see,
you know?
I see. Of
So it's
course.
like
Okay,
I
okay.
don't really know exactly because I didn't really go. There wasn't too much detail as like sexual preference or anything. It was just like he was just known to target.
No, and that's fine. I was
So-
just curious because I knew
Yeah.
with someone like Dahmer, which
because he was
we won't get
out,
into,
like he was out, like very
yeah,
open with him being, homosexual and
just
everything.
curious.
At least Dahmer.
Yeah, no,
was.
Dahmer was, and
Yeah.
that's why I was curious if he was too.
Yeah. Well, when you dive into this information, MacArthur's victims were often lured into his home or to secluded areas where he would torture, sexually assault, and kill them. Well, I mean, if he's sexually assaulting them, I would think maybe
There's
you
at
know,
least some kind of physical,
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, something with that. He used tools from his landscaping business, such as ropes and leashes, to restrain and subdue his victims. He would then dress up the bodies and photograph them before disposing of them. Now, there is even like one where I heard there's even a picture of like one of the dead bodies like with a cigar like in its mouth and everything, like just like a weird, yeah. So it's kind of believed that he had some fixation with bodies, and there are even some talks of him possibly even like robbing dead bodies
Okay.
and doing stuff, so it's a little weird.
Interesting.
Yeah. So some of the bodies were even found dismembered with parts stored in large planters and landscapes at properties that MacArthur had worked on. So he wasn't even hiding it at his own house. He was like literally getting contracted to do jobs. And while the people were like, oh yeah, like he's out there resodding, the grass or something, he's literally like putting people's bodies or
Oh
like
my
parts of
God,
them
dude, that's
like under their,
wild.
yeah. And it's, man, dude, it's just crazy. I mean, you read it and you're like, wow, this is like real life. Like this is
that's
like a
the
real
thing that's
person doing
hard
something
about
like
these
this.
stories.
So, it became pretty much like a key piece of the evidence is like finding all this stuff out. I think they went over to like 70 different like people's properties to like
wow.
uncover stuff, because it's like,
Yeah.
that's his job. You got to search, kind
you
of
gotta
like
be prepared
everywhere.
That he
and
could have done this to like,
many more
many
people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, if you only know about 8, but so it's just crazy, dude. It's crazy. And you go into the investigation, the arrest of like everything. So like MacArthur evaded attention for several years despite multiple reports of missing people, and the police failed and faced a lot of criticism for like their inaction like during these 7 years. So a lot of people even think that it had to do with it being like the gay community and everything.
Interesting.
So that's also something to think about. But in January of 2018, so this is like really recent. Like we graduated in
Yeah,
2018 like of high school. So, in 2018, Bruce McArthur was apprehended by the Toronto Police Service after a comprehensive year-long investigation by this point. This operation, referred to as Project Prism, was initiated in response to a troubling pattern of disappearances involving men from the gay community in Toronto.
So he got... Well, I guess some of his victims were from back in 2010, so I guess this took them at least like 8 years to finally catch the guy, but he was apprehended.
Or even find out about it,
Or at least even find out about it. But
So
he was apprehended at this point.
Yeah. So he's in 2018 apprehended, and the investigation took a significant turn when authorities observed McArthur on surveillance in the company of Andrew Kinsman, who is one of the individuals that was reported missing up in that list above that I had read. Yeah.
Interesting. So he got caught on cam.
Yeah. So that was like some pretty like convincing evidence like found on McArthur just right there.
And see, that's the difference, between somebody like Night Stalker and him is like back in the 80s, you didn't have cameras on homes.
High tech. Yeah, you didn't have any of that. So it's like,
yeah,
you
so
can
that makes
just
a lot of
see
sense then why he would have been a little bit more easily caught, I would say.
And that's just like what, a 30-year difference? Maybe close to like 40-year difference, like just in the technology itself. It's pretty insane, So following this lead, police executed searches of McArthur's properties, which included his residential home as well as several locations he had worked with, which is like around like the 70 number that I'd given before.
Okay.
During these searches, investigators uncovered compelling evidence linked to the murders, i.e., like remains, unfortunately, of the victims, buried in planters and other locations associated with McArthur.
Buried in planters is so disrespectful.
That's dirty, dude. That is so foul. That is so foul. Like, those people were paying you for a service, dude.
Yeah.
Like, now they're caught up in some business they never thought they'd be in. Like, nah.
Yeah.
So, this ultimately confirmed their worst fears about the extent of his crimes, obviously, finding remains of people and, like, not even full bodies, people. Like, that's just, So, this led to a widespread shock within the community and beyond, obviously, especially being in I would say a more tight-knit community that we have, over here. Like, that would just be such a crazy... I mean, that's the mall Santa. Like, people know this guy.
This is someone who, like, you often think can do no harm. Like, is, like...
the person you'd least expect, like, doing something like this. So, when it comes to the trial, Bruce was charged with 8 accounts of first-degree murder, and he pled guilty to the charges in 2019, avoiding a trial completely. He just pled guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. Which you would think maybe you get a little bit more.
I mean, he was sentenced to life.
For 25 years. Like, one life sentence is 25.
Without the Oh. Yeah, I see. Well, wait, is that what that means? He's sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years?
If you get served a life sentence, I think a life sentence is 25 years.
Is it? Is that what that means?
Mm-hmm.
I actually did not know that.
Yeah. It's either 25 or 50, but I believe it's 25.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, this is also just a brutal story. I mean, it's sick to think that someone that is meant to be such like a...
someone to spread joy and cheer around the holidays is out here doing some crazy...
And I've always wondered, especially with all these cases, I mean, even ones we didn't talk about like Dahmer, but with the Night Stalker and this guy, McArthur, what is the sick fascination with dismemberment? I don't understand. Like, it's one thing to take a life. It's like you feel the power, you feel in control, I guess. I would imagine.
Yeah. But now I'm going to cut them up and like...
yeah, like, what is the fantasy there? What is the...
just dressing up the bodies.
I mean, that's
and, like,
sick in a whole other way.
That.
Yeah.
Like, just...
that's to me is sick in a way that's like, you're already committing one of the most vile acts imaginable. if not the most vile act a person
multiple
can do.
vile acts
But
on
you're
someone.
then going to disrespect the bodies in such a way after they're gone. It's like,
And then you're gonna cut them up and like do like
Yeah.
whatever other stuff you're gonna do. It's just like that was a person like with
now, and you mentioned that he had a troubled life, right? But didn't it mention that
Yeah.
it was like with just like relationships?
yeah, it does. Yeah, it's like
I don't know. I mean,
unless there's more to that, you
Sure,
know,
sure.
like but
I don't know. I mean,
troubled relationship. I mean, the only thing I can think of is being an older guy who is homosexual, trying to come out like back in the day, you know. But at the
Maybe,
same time,
maybe.
it's like I still don't see how any of that is room for what you're doing,
and it's
you know, to
interesting.
people.
Yeah, he never, from at least your research that you have, he never attacked any of like the people coming to see Santa, did he?
No, no.
Okay.
From what I can tell, it was really just these people within this small community that were known for like being more like LGBTQ, you know,
Like
like
he would
centered,
seek out
you
those
know?
kinds of places.
Yeah. So to me, it doesn't sound like. I mean, that's the one good thing I guess he's got going for him. Like he's not out here hurting kids
Yeah.
and stuff. But it's like,
Which is, I
You
guess,
know.
in a way better than the Night Stalker, but it's really not right to like try and compare and contrast.
yeah, there's
these
no,
guys.
there's no
They're both
comparing.
sick. Like
Yeah.
that's the truth of it.
Yeah, it's really crazy, dude. I just don't understand if you don't have any like mental like things going on. I just don't understand how you could look at someone with all intent of like I'm ending your life. Like, you know, that's just like
In this case, I would like think to believe that it is more of a naturally, I mean, unless there's stuff I don't know about his backstory.
which I'm sure there's probably a lot of information we don't.
But I
We don't
would
have.
I would fashion to guess that this is just a classic case of a mental health issue, like a naturally generative, like he just growing up, his brain didn't develop properly, not because of
Yeah.
abuse or anything. Some people just don't, you know, not to repeat myself, but don't develop correctly. Their
Yeah.
bodies don't like have people have. You have people who are terrible with like what's the word, social cues and stuff like
and-
that, and I don't want to name any kind of disorder or problem with people and then like say that makes you a serial killer. That's not what I'm saying. But people just have problems understanding society, and I think that maybe in this case, based on just having a bad problem with some of his past relationships, that seems more like maybe this guy just has like a low ticket of like what he can take, and then like if he has a bit too much, if it goes over that, you know, boundary, he's like, I'm gonna take a life, you know.
Yeah.
And it's
Well, yeah, because it even says that it was abuse related.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so it's like, I don't know if there's maybe anger issues involved there. Maybe he's angry at himself
yeah,
for being, you know, I mean, it said that he was sexually assaulting like the men and stuff as well. So, like, is there maybe like a hatred for himself, like being homosexual or like, you know, anything like that? I mean, he's a stereotypical, when you look at what he looks like, he's a stereotypical, you know, older white male. You know, someone who you could definitely be like, oh, yeah, like someone who could be a deacon in a church type of thing, you know? So it's like maybe there's some like religious like guilt, maybe some anger, you know, depending on what that looks like.
Yeah. And I
You
also
know,
think,
and-
I mean, I don't know, I'm not a psychologist in any kind of way, but I would think that once you've done it enough, it's kind of like we said a bit with the Night Stalker, you kind of have that feeling of like invincibility, and maybe it could be more of like, now I can't stop.
Yeah.
Like maybe you
yeah.
feel like you've gone too far, and now even
It's like,
if
I
you
guess
do
got to
regret
just
it,
keep going.
yeah, what
you
else
know?
can I do? You know, like I can't just go back. I can't just repent for this. Now I don't know if that's how this guy feels, but
Yeah, I have no idea. I mean, he's still serving right now.
yeah.
Because, I mean, this
I mean, this is
happened pretty recent.
very recent,
so.
yeah. You gotta love these stories, man.
I know, dude. I feel like I'm sad, dude. I'm sad.
Whose idea was this again? I can't remember who originally
I think it was probably yours.
It was probably mine. Yeah. I thought
you got rid of bear facts, and now you're took over a whole episode of just sadness, bro.
Well, I mean, this should fill the void of anyone who was missing bear facts, because all we talked about over there was people dying. So
now you got an episode dedicated to it.
You got a whole episode, but oh yeah, let's hop into a discussion. Let's see what we think about all of this.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about everything we've discussed. Ow. I don't know if Chad heard that or not in the final edit. Hurt my toe. But what do you think of all this? This was quite a lot of real heavy stuff to have to...
I mean, it's pretty sad. It's a little hard. That's it. All right, let's wrap it up.
It sucks. It's sorry to joke, but we said we're trying to still make it kind of lighthearted.
We joke in awkward situations enough as it is, so this has been pretty hard. But no, it's really it's a tragic thing to, I guess. I mean, we're not reporting on it. We don't have any new information than anyone else can find, but it is like really sad reading through all of these documents and websites and articles just to realize that, man, these people were real. They were people who were relatively close to where we are now. People who had their whole lives ahead of them. People who had dreams, hopes, aspirations with their lives. And they were unfortunately cut short by people who couldn't get a hold of their own, you know?
Oh my God, sorry to interrupt with my throat. Sorry, chat. Go on. Sorry.
No, but it's just, it's really unfortunate knowing that people can't get the help that they really need. You know.
Do you mean in that statement in regards to the killers or the families?
I think if maybe they had that help, you know, before it came down to them.
The unfortunate thing about
going down
that is that a lot of times people just don't know. We don't know. Like, no one knows that someone's going through this. I mean, I'm sure that though all that information came out about Richard's, childhood and his trauma, I'm sure none of that was being talked about for years, which is why he went on for so long thinking that this was just what he had to deal with.
Yeah. It just sucks that he didn't have like those positive people in his life to even direct him to like, hey, this stuff is wrong. This shouldn't be happening to you. You shouldn't be watching this stuff. You shouldn't be doing this stuff. It's like almost if he had parents that cared, this could have been prevented,
Absolutely.
Having your kid smoking weed at 10, drinking, smoking, doing all this other stuff at 14, really it's like, it's a classic case of letting your kids run wild and then wondering why they've turned out
the way they
being
did.
like this, so it's crazy. As far as like McArthur, bro just sounded like he had some problems, some underlining issues that just kind of,
which he still, should have. I mean, obviously should have, but like, I wish he would have just seeked help, because that's the thing that is kind of the harsh reality when you're going down a road as dark as this. The way out is not fun. It's likely, very likely, unless you're the Night Stalker's cousin for some reason and you blame it on PTSD. But that was also the 80s, so
yeah,
sorry.
That's true.
But the unfortunate reality, if you have gone down a road like this and you've committed some of these awful, awful things, is that you're not going to get out unscathed. You're going to have to, if you do it the right way, you're going to have to likely go to prison. You're likely going to have to face the consequences of what you've done. But the problem I see is, like we mentioned with MacArthur, how, it could be a case of once you start, you just don't think you can stop. And then you get like kind of addicted to the adrenaline and the rush. I think another part of it is fear. Once you've stopped, you're like, now I'm too afraid to go back to the life that I had, and I'm too afraid to face society and face what people would look and think of me.
Yeah.
And because I know I would. I know if anyone, if I was like going down the road of either of these two sick people, that I would think no one would ever forgive me. No one's ever going to see me as a human being anymore.
Which they probably won't.
But you have... I know they don't really care for human life in the way that someone like you and me do. But I wish that people like them could see that these people have families, these people have futures, and even though it may suck to have to go and turn yourself in, it's like, it's the most humane thing to do. And I guess that's like a fantasy for this kind of problem for serial killers in general.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you're a serial killer, you probably just don't have normal feelings.
Probably
as far
not.
As,
you're
like,
probably very numb to it.
And all that. Like, you probably don't even think about something like, oh, I just killed a person, you know?
Yeah.
It's normally people who are like killing for self-defense, or like, you know, they're about to be killed, or like they accidentally kill someone.
I guess I meant that for those who go down that road but seek change, and not to bring Dahmer up again, but I know that his story ended with him supposedly coming to Christ in prison.
Yeah.
So to know that some of these killers, the biggest ones out there, may still have that moral backbone somewhere inside. I guess for those ones who seek, help.
Yeah.
They should just, accept that the help is not going to be fun, but it's help. It is help. You can still find help, especially for mental issues. Like, I know that Richard Ramirez was abused for a long time of his life, so I'm sure he has...
Seek better help, man.
Seek BetterHelp.
If only we were sponsored by them, this would be a great time to insert BetterHelp, because, if you're going through some trauma stuff as a child, maybe you need some therapy now. So,
and you can, BetterHelp. Not to promote them because they aren't a sponsor, but you can get in touch with them in any way you please. Email, text, call,
FaceTime.
If you don't want to be seen. Chat. And it's super easy to change your therapist, too. You can change it whenever you want.
You can even do it online.
Yeah, it's hard because it's hard to come to a conclusion on this kind of episode, because it's like, what conclusion are we supposed to make? If you have committed serial killing, you deserve everything that's coming to you. That's an easy one.
Yeah.
But I also don't.
Well, especially if you're doing it the way that these two were doing it. It's just like, dude,
dismemberment
there's no need.
And sexual abuse, and it's just like, it's a lot. Now, I don't personally, maybe this is wrong to bring up on the podcast, but I think it's fine. I don't personally believe in the death penalty.
I don't either.
I don't want anyone to die. I do think justice is
a dish sold. Revenge is a dish best served cold.
Yeah.
I really do hope you edit out what happened, so I can tell chat right now that before I recorded that right now, I just had a brain aneurysm.
Okay,
and couldn't say that sentence.
No, but justice is definitely deserved. And so I would definitely completely believe in life in prison, and I think 25 years is low for some of these kinds of things. But I don't think
we have the, if I'm like a judge, I personally don't think I have the right to say whether or not someone dies.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can commit a pretty heinous act, but it's like, I'd rather the people handle that if they feel so inclined. I mean, I know that's a pretty bent way of having justice, but it's like,
didn't that story of the Night Stalker kind of feel like the most justice served to someone who's committed these kinds of crimes? Because the townsfolk found out and then just beat the snot out of him.
Yeah.
Like it felt like real justice. It felt like the community finally got to come back. And again, I don't want him to die, but a broken nose is absolutely fine.
Yeah, it's absolutely necessary at this point.
Necessary. That's the right word.
Yeah.
Necessary.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. I think a human having enough power over another human to dictate their life and when it ends, I don't know. That's never like really sat right with me. Mm-hmm. But I mean, it doesn't sit right with me these cases either. So it's
hard, and everyone, most of the time the argument will be, well, what if it was your mom? What if it was your sister? What if it was your girlfriend or your wife? And
you're like, you're right. The situation would change, but it's like, you know,
as it
we're
speaks now,
we're also human, you know, and
you know,
we have to remember that, you know, if you got the wrong person in one of these cases, or what, because that's the thing I always think of. I think of like how many people have been wrongly convicted of something that are put on the death penalty, and you're so eager and ready to send them, you know, to death.
Your emotions are heightened. Like, everything.
You know, you're in a courtroom where you're hearing people plead their cases, and they're going to say whatever they can say to get out of whatever's happening, you know, but you get caught up in all that. And it's like you could very well be technically being the murderer. Yeah, like you could be the murderer at that point, you know. So it's
and there's no taking it back. There's no other side to that, sentencing. It's
there's no Uno reverse card.
Exactly.
And getting that turned back, like once they're gone, and you have to live with your decision, like ultimately killing someone, you know.
And I know I think they try to make it, especially these days compared to the old ways. I think they try to make it as comfortable as possible. And
didn't they used to like wet the sponges and put it on people's head when they would do the zap, the electric share? I think there was like one point where they would put like a wet sponge on their head and then put the contraption on, so that way it like literally like electrocuted them. Like
and I know they don't do that anymore. They're a lot more humane, but humane is not necessarily a synonym of right. At least in my opinion. You know, I also am not judging anyone who believes in the death penalty, because again, justice is different for every person.
Yeah. We could be considered Weenie Hut Juniors.
Yeah.
In this situation, that's fine.
It's just where we stand. Yeah. You know, it's where we kind of come to the conclusion.
You know, I think we should bring back the medieval torture devices.
Where they like expand the arms until they just rip off.
Fun fact, want to know why that was so like prevalent in that time?
Why is that?
Was because there was no form of DNA evidence or proof or anything like that back in those days. So a lot of the times people didn't see you commit the crime, you would just get away. Like like you're done. Like you're fine. You can get away with murder or anything if someone didn't witness you doing it. So part of the reason they had like the medieval torture devices were when the people were caught in the act and people did know who it was and everything, they would make a show out of those people, especially to scare people into not doing any.
Show just how dark a human can be.
Yep. And that's supposed to be justice, chat. Yeah. So all forms of justice are different.
Yeah, this was a lot. This
is a good one. Good, yeah.
Good episode. High five.
Yeah. Woo.
Well, as we stated, if you or anyone were involved in any of these stories, feel free to let us know any of your thoughts, concerns, stories, accounts, opinions, because we really just want to hear from our very small, what is it? Something knit community?
Our tight-knit community.
And
if you're still... Gosh, dude, I can't even talk.
We're both struggling. It's okay.
Man, it's been a day.
We were going so well while reading the accounts that we wasted all of our brain energy.
Now we're done. Yeah. Now we're done. And I was going to say, if you're a serial killer, please don't write in, because then I got to get the police involved, and that's a big old legal thing. And I'm tired, man. I can barely get this episode out.
Yeah, but so let us know. Not the serial killers, everybody else. But yeah, let us know. And hopefully we see you back next week for a less sad episode.
A pretty fun episode.
Pretty fun one.
I'm excited.
Is it the one I'm thinking of?
Yeah.
Ah, great. So join us next week. Thank you
When
guys.
we talk about a talking mongoose. All right, we've been your hosts, Brent Murphy
and Joey Rucker.
Later, Gators.
Woo!
The Woodsmen Podcast is actively reading and responding to everything and anything on Instagram and our email. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about the show, or would like to possibly be on the show, you can email us at thewoodsmanpod@gmail.com. Make sure to keep up with all things Woodsman related on Instagram as well, at WoodsmanPod. Don't forget to rate, like, and subscribe to the Woodsmen Podcast wherever you get your podcasts, with video exclusively on YouTube and Patreon. Make sure to follow our personal accounts at Strange Kids and Piemaster J on all platforms.
The Woodsman Podcast is co-produced by Brent Murphy and Joey Rucker.
Our technical producer and engineer is Eric Bessero at Elite Sound Studios, with additional engineering by Brent Murphy.
Video editing by Joey Rucker, and Blood, Sweat, and Tears by all of us.
Any additional content by the Woodsman Podcast may not be used without our permission. Copyright Cabin 13 Productions. And remember, you can't have cereal without any milk.